Hello there. So you're interested in the music of Nikolai Kapustin and you're looking to perform some of them for yourself? Well, here's an introductory guide for the trained pianist. Also, be sure to check out our website, nikolaikapustin.com, for links to where you can buy all the sheet music and CDs for everything mentioned here. Let's get started. Now, if you've listened to any one of his pieces, then you know that he's basically the ultimate master of classical and jazz form. He writes super jazzy music, but he uses sonata forms and rondos that are very characteristic of the classical music genre. If you've ever listened to it, then you also know that most of it is extremely difficult, exceptionally difficult. We're talking on par with Chopin ballades, Etudes, and the like Beethoven sonatas. These are not easy pieces. That being said, if you're a more intermediate pianist, then a great place to start for a piece that's actually quite approachable considering the oeuvre of his work is his Sonatina Opus 100. This is a pretty straightforward sonatina, follows the form pretty a la Mozart, and it's still jazzy and syncopated on all the ways that make a Kapustin piece sound like Kapustin. But like I said, it's very Mozartian, very light, very approachable. It was actually written for I think a high school piano competition. Don't quote me on that. But it was written for intermediate pianists in training versus, virtuoso pianists. Not beginners, if you just started learning, this is still a quite tough piece, but for someone at more of the high school level. Now beyond that, let's just get on to the classics. We have to start with, of course, the 8 concert etudes. These are super famous. Most people don't do all of them because it'd be like doing all of the Chopin etudes, and so that's just really tough to do all of them. But they'll do a selection. Obviously, I think the most popular is probably the third one. Yuzha Wang did it after a concert. It was also featured on the opening of Gran Turismo 5, so it's pretty popular Toccata. If you're really good at thirds already, then the intermezzo will be right up your alley as well. Now, the second and fourth etudes, Reverie and Reminiscence, are probably the least performed individually, so maybe someone out there listening to this can be like, hey, let me put this on the end of my recital as opposed to just the Toccata. The Pastoral is quite light, and it's not as heavy as the others, and then the finale is just I've never heard so many notes in such a short period of time. Now, the bluesiest and most straightforward of the set is probably the Raillery, the fifth part. It's basically just jazzy blues stuff for 2.5 minutes. That's the 8 concert etudes. Super famous, great selection. Now, beyond that, a great selection, and there's actually a book of just miscellaneous piano works, is the following: the Sunrise Toccata, Variations, Motive Force, Big Band Sounds, and Contemplation. These are all featured in one book of miscellaneous piano works by Kapustin. Now, of these, I'd say the most famous are definitely the Variations and the Toccata. Okay, the Toccata, unlike the one in the concert etudes, which is very much a rock song, this Toccata is much more a pop song. So it's lighter, it's poppier, it's brighter, and it's a really great encore piece. The Variations are also a great, sizable work to have in your recital. They're incredibly famous. They're on so many different CDs, people who don't even play lots of Kapustin music, they'll do other works and then they'll throw the Variations on there. And I'm just going to be honest with you, it's probably because they're Variations literally on the opening of the Rite of Spring. Da, 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 da. They're literally Variations on that. So that really makes it a selling point because you can hear oh, that's the Rite of Spring. What's he going to do with that? And so that in and of itself probably makes it more famous because you can be hey, this guy wrote Variations on the opening of the Rite of Spring. What? Really? So that's already a conversation starter, probably what makes it more popular. Of course, let's not also forget the Suite in the Old Style. One of my favorites, I actually did this in a piano recital where I paired it with a Bach French Suite. This is one of my favorites because you get to hear jazz on Baroque forms. You get to hear a jazz gavotte, a jazz allemande, a jazz bourrée, a jazz jig. These are super jazzy things, but they're still gavottes and jigs and bourrées. So you get to hear really cool takes on making bourrées have the language of jazz, yet still have the feeling of a bourrée, which is really amazing. So that's really awesome. So I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorites. Now let's move on to his more major works. I'm talking, of course, about the sonatas. There are over 20 sonatas in all. Most of them have not been performed very much at all. Only a handful of them have been performed. They are all available on YouTube or Spotify if you know where to look. But like I said, I don't think I've heard many of them in concert halls. The most popular right now that are actually in the most CDs would probably be number 1, 2, 6, and 15, especially the first two and number 15. Number 15 probably because of John Salmon. He came out with that Naxos recording of it. Now, there's other ones in there. Some of them are actually quite strange. He tries to be more experimental. I'm really hoping someone out there is listening to this and puts it on their own recital, because there's some really great stuff. Like, we got Sonata number 20 and number 19. They have some really interesting things that are going on. They're all really major works, like 12 to 20 minutes in length. So a lot of great stuff to choose from there. Now, if you're looking for just like a selection of pieces, you can't go wrong with the Preludes from Opus 53. There's 24 in all, which cover all 24 major and minor keys. The most famous, I would think, are number 12, 13, 17, 19, and 23. Now, I know it's a lot. Basically, when you search for these preludes, when you're listening to a recording that isn't just the entire set, odds are one of those 5 are going to appear on that recording. 23 is probably my favorite because it's lighter and jazzier. It's kind of fun. Some of the slower, more dissonant-y works, it's just not my style. But if you like some of the slower ones, there's a few in there as well. Now, beyond those jazz preludes, he also wrote 24 preludes and fugues, just like Bach. Now, I don't think any of these have really made the rounds. They're not on a lot of recordings. I basically found only one recording that has all 24. Basically, Kapustin made a recording of all of them, and I think that's it. Maybe one other. So definitely find that recording on Spotify and find the ones you like, because there's no reason why these pieces shouldn't be appearing on recitals here and there, at least some of them. I've listened to a handful. I haven't listened to the whole set, but there's some pretty nice preludes in the set, and the fugues are just, a lot of them are really weird because we're talking about jazz music but done in a fugue way, so it's not going to have all the trappings that you'd want from a piece of music that's more dance-like or jazzy, because fugues tend to be a little more, I guess, mathematical, because it's about following voices, and it just so happens the voices will be jazzy in nature, but it's not going to sound like jazz, if that makes sense, because they're fugues. So they'll have a richer harmonic palette, but at the end of the day, they're still fugues. So that kind of holds it back, but then again, like for people who love Bach, they're going to have a field day. So if you're someone who loves Bach, who loves fugues, who loves following voices around, and you're like, how could I get a fugue of like a crazy jazzy-like melody? Then listen to these guys, because you can't go wrong. Now, that being said, in his later opuses, he wrote a lot of just random pieces. A Pianist in Jeopardy, Wandering, Moon Rainbow, and a whole bunch of others. All of them are just their own thing. They're just individual pieces he wrote. I think someday, once they're more popular, there'll probably be like an assorted works book of them versus having to get them all a la carte right now. Most of them you can find on Spotify or YouTube, so be sure to give them a listen. If you're looking for something a little short to just throw on your recital, any one of them will do just fine. Each one has its own unique sounds and things like that. Now, before we go, I do want to emphasize that he wrote a lot of music, not just for solo piano. He wrote 6 piano concertos, which you can all find on YouTube. And he also wrote cello sonatas, violin sonatas, piano quintets, piano trios. And so there's a lot of chamber music there that's available to you. So if you're a collaborative pianist who wants to get some Kapustin in on your in your trio or quintet, definitely check it out. There's some good resources. If you know where to look online, just search around. You'll find the sheet music. Again, YouTube is the best place, because a lot of these have not actually been released on CDs. And if they are, they were like in Japan. So they're not necessarily the most readily available things to find. But, scour Spotify. And if there's one that hasn't been performed, then, be the debut. That being said, whatever speaks to you, you should learn. Go out, listen to his music, get familiar with his repertoire. And not a lot of it has been recorded. Not a lot of it is featured in recital halls across the country, across the world. There are a few popular hits right now, but that obviously is going to expand in the next few decades. So get familiar with some of the more obscure works. There's probably a few hidden treasures there that's going to be as popular as the jazz preludes are today. They just haven't really been heard by the masses yet. And so go and be that person who's like, oh, I really like this one. And, if you like it, other people are going to like it. And then it's going to start being heard more, because this stuff is just amazing. It's just amazing, amazing stuff. And I really hope that more people put them on their recitals, because it's just really beautiful music. That's all I have to say. All the links to where you can buy all the sheet music are available on the website, nikolaikapustin.com. I hope that you found this informative. And I do want to say my favorite piece, if I ever do an encore piece for a recital, is definitely going to be the Etude in minor seconds. I have never heard anything like it. It is the crunchiest thing I've ever heard in my life. So if you want to learn something really, really wild, I highly recommend that. So thanks for watching, and have an awesome day.